Thank you, Pat. 1 Samuel chapter 13. And some of you thought we'd never get through Samuel. We left last week at the end of chapter 12. Israel's messed it up and God is offering them grace and mercy. It's amazing how the Lord puts everything together. The trick of Saul is to keep intimate with God, which is what we talked about last Sunday. To overcome these feelings that he has every day, as Joseph had to. And at the end of verse 25, it says, if you continue to sin, you and your king will be swept away. Spoiler alert, by the end of 1 Samuel, Saul kills himself. There's also, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom are swept away. So there's a prophecy here that actually comes true. God says if you keep sinning, the kingdom, your king and you will be swept away. And that happens. It happens with Saul. It happens in Israelite history. They have the same fight we do. To fear the Lord, to faithfully serve him, to think of all the wonderful things he's done. And they've got a reprieve. They've asked for a king. God's rained down thunder and rain. And yet now he's given them a reprieve. In chapter 13 and verse 1, there's a lot of conjecture. Some say 1 year, 2 years. There's all kinds of conjecture. I'd be here for 50 minutes trying to explain it and I still wouldn't get anywhere. In Acts, what we do know, we don't really know their age. In the New Living, it says 30 years old when he became king. But what we do know, in Acts, it tells us he reigned for 40 years. So however old he was, Saul reigned for 40 years. And why that is important is this. Because I think 2 years into it, he'd already messed it up. 2 years into it, God gives up, tells him we're done here. But he allows him to reign as king for 40 years. God has given, we're going to speak about on Sunday, but God has gifted Saul. God has made him handsome, he's made him tall, which really isn't much of a deal apart from God used that because that's why people liked him. But he's given Saul all kinds of abilities and then he's anointed him to be king. He's gifted him and in that gifting he's anointed him to be king. And he reigns for 40 years. 40 years is a long time. And he started off so well. And it doesn't last very long and you start to see how Saul's life is the same kind of journey that we can go on sometimes. And so whatever verse 1 means and the scribal stuff and all of that, it doesn't matter if he was 30 or 35 or whatever. What matters is he reigned for 40 years. So God allowed him to reign for 40 years. And what was he doing in that 40-year period? He had another one in mind. We'll find out. He was training who? He was training David. In part of that, he was training David. If you go back to chapter 10 a minute. Chapter 11. Chapter 11. In verse 8, remember when they're going to go and fight the Ammonites? The people were afraid of Saul's anger. How many people came out? 300,000 from Israel and 30,000 from Judah. There's a question about that, whether it's 30 or 70,000 too, but 300,000+ men came. When Saul, verse 8 of chapter 11, when Saul mobilized them at Bezek, he found that there were 300,000 men from Israel and 30,000 men from Judah. All right, so they have a lot of men, they have a lot of people. From 330,000, you go down to 3,000. So less than 1% is left. They send them all the way to their tents. And remember, Gideon had 300. But in verse 2 it says, Saul selected 3,000 special troops. So out of the 300,000+, Saul selects 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel and sends the rest of the men home. He sends a ton of people home. And they're left with 3,000. Saul takes 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash and the hill country of Bethel. And 1,000 men go with Saul's son, who? Jonathan. To Jabbar in the land of Benjamin. So 2,000 go with Saul, 1,000 go with Jonathan, and 300,000 people have been released. Verse 3. Soon after this. If you were to look at the story, who's the better leader, Saul or Jonathan? Who's the better, godlier man? Jonathan by far. Jonathan is an amazing person. He's an amazing, we'll see next week how amazing he does. We'll see how if you know the story about David and Jonathan weren't just close, they were really, really close. And Saul's actions, and this is what you have to understand, when God anoints you, the only way out of that anointing is sin. Like if God anoints you to do something, sin is the only way out of that. It's because disobedience, sin will take you out of that. Otherwise, God will do it. Jonathan would be next in line to be king. He would have been an amazing king. But because of Saul's life, Jonathan never gets that chance. You imagine being heir to the throne. Saul's king. It's obvious who's going to be the next king. Jonathan. You imagine thinking that, knowing that. And then when Saul is taken out, and we'll see that, and David comes on the scene, what would you expect Jonathan to do, fleshly, humanly speaking? Reject him, try and manipulate the situation, and yet he's the best friend, the best help David could have. And he says to David, here, I'm helping you. God has anointed you. And that's the only reason he was good with it, because he knew, he believed God had anointed David. And through this story, we'll see this sad story of Saul got anointed. Saul was chosen by God to do something amazing. And remember, we talked about it a few weeks ago. He started off so well, and people were trying to come after him, and he's like, we're not going to do anything to them. He was kind of humble. He was a bit timid. He was hiding in the supplies, and yet something happens. So you have 2,000 and 1,000. And in verse 3 it says, soon after this Jonathan attacked. It was Jonathan, the garrison of the Philistines at Jabbar. So there's this garrison, there's this hideout, there's this military outpost of the Philistines, and Jonathan attacks them. Jonathan attacks them, and what does he do? He defeats them. Whenever Israel defeats someone, you know what? What do you know when Israel defeats someone? God's with them, right? God's for them. Whenever Israel loses military like this, it's always because he wasn't for them. That doesn't mean they won't go through bad trial. I'm not saying every bad thing that happens to Israel, that's not the case. But in military things like this, when you read the Old Testament, I don't know of a single incident where they lost a military battle because they were obedient. Whenever they get beat, it's because of their disobedience. I think whenever they win, it's a sign that God is with them and doing something amazing. Now, sometimes we talked about God will just do it himself to prove a point. Jonathan attacks and he defeats the Philistines. He's not scared. He defeats them. Obviously, when you start attacking the enemy, what's going to happen? A fight's coming. You know that, right? That when you provoke a war, when you win a war, you know there's going to be retaliation. The news spread quickly among who? Among the Philistines. The Philistines, you will see tonight, they've got a lot of pull, a lot of power over the Israelites, which shouldn't have been in the first place. But the Philistines control a lot of things. And Jonathan, by the way, with 1,000. Now they are skilled, it says. But he has 1,000. And that doesn't bother him. That doesn't scare him. He goes to the Philistines, and he defeats them. And when he defeats them, the Philistines wake up. The Philistines are probably shocked and surprised, and they've just got beaten. And so the news spread among the Philistines. And here you start to see the downfall of Saul. What did Saul have to do with that? Nothing. He wasn't even there. He's got 2,000, double what Jonathan has. And Jonathan has 1,000. And Jonathan attacks. That should be a proud moment for a dad and a son, right? And yet look what happens. So this news spreads among the Philistines. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, Hebrews, hear this, rise up in revolt. The context is he literally blows his own horn. He celebrates a victory. He celebrates him. He doesn't give any credit to who? There's no credit of Jonathan. And there's a weird thing, and I don't really understand it. I tried to read about it. He says, Hebrews, hear this. It's like that derogatory term the enemies use. He doesn't say guys, he doesn't say family, he doesn't even say, he says, Hebrews, hear this, rise up and revolt. And listen, so all Israel heard the news that Saul, see what I mean? And look at verse 4. Hebrews, hear this, rise up in revolt. Saul knows Philistines have been woken up. He blows the horn and he says, get up and revolt, rise up in revolt. And all Israel heard the news that what? That Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Jabbar. Is that true? No. He didn't even have anything to do with it. Jonathan did it. What kind of, can you see how all of a sudden you've gone from the guy that was kind of timid, the guy that didn't have to exact revenge, to a guy now that is willing to take all the credit, all the glory, even when it's his own son. You can see how his character, how these things are changing, how it's seeping in. Now, this is what God said, right? When you have a king, you're not going to what? You're not really going to want a king. Do you really want a king who takes the credit for something he hasn't done? But that's kind of how this kingship works. Like, he gets what he wants. And so, look at what's happening. The news spread quickly. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land. Hebrews, hear this, rise up in revolt. All Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Jabbar, and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than what? Jonathan has really kicked up this war. I believe Jonathan has done it at God's command. Jonathan wasn't wrong. Jonathan has beaten the Philistines. And if God is for you, who can be what? And this whole story is about fear and trust. And so, of course, they win. So the Philistines hate them. But why should that bother God's people? If God tells you to go and fight and you win, and now the enemy gets ticked off and hates you, who cares? Because you're either going to make the Philistines mad, or you're going to make who mad? I mean, if God says go and kill, you've got two options. Make God happy or make the Philistines happy. And guess which one's the best move? I mean, it's what Peter says. You ask for yourself who it's better for me to please, you or God. The Philistines get mad. Of course they do. They lost. They lost with 1,000 people. So Saul blows the horn, all Israel hears, and they destroyed the Philistine garrison at Jabbar, and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. So there's this kind of emergency meeting, and I was trying to figure out if they called back the 300,000, but I don't think they did, and I'll show you why later. So I think these men now are called back for this kind of emergency meeting at Gilgal. They've won, and this is... One. It's always good when your wife's like, I didn't know she was fighting flies or doing the air traffic control. Or, all right. Where was I? Anyway, all right. They're summoned to join Saul at Gilgal, and this is all what God... That's even worse now. They're summoned to join him at Gilgal. And so I think there's 3,000 people come together. And what's crazy about the Israelites is, if you're not going to be secure and happy and at peace when you win, when are you going to be? Like, if you can't have peace and joy and be okay when you're winning, then, I mean, if you can't be good in the victories, what you're going to be like in the defeats? God has just said, if you follow me, if you obey me, and think about all the wonderful things and fear me, I will be good to you. It's a pretty good start with Jonathan. And yet, because the enemy, why would we think anything less? If we're doing anything for God, of course the enemy, listen, if the thought of the enemy being stirred scares you, or the enemy hating you scares you, then you really don't understand, do you? Of course the enemy hates you. Of course the enemy's coming. That shouldn't be a shock. That shouldn't be a surprise. That shouldn't keep us up at night. That's exactly what spiritual warfare is. Like, if anyone sits there tonight and says, I don't think I want to do that. I don't want to upset the devil. You're often, that's bonkers. It's crazy. And yet they've won this battle. And God God is showing them, look, when you do it, I'll defend you, I'll help you. And so they join at Gilgal, and the entire Israelite army was summoned. When you summon an army, what do you really want to be high? You need morale to be good, right? I mean, an army with low morale is not very good, is it? God has given us every reason as his people, as Israel, his people, to really have high morale at all times. And it says the Philistines mustered, notice what it says, a mighty what? Here's this moment. And here's this moment that we face in our life. We do what God is asking to do, he blesses us, and the enemy responds, and what we do next is pivotal. Saul's son Jonathan is attacked and defeated the Philistines. Saul claims the victory. He shouts at the Hebrews to rise up in revolt. And the Philistines say, we're not having this. And they make a response. When you look at the stories in the Old Testament of fighting, what's a very graven mistake that people make? It's the same mistake that was made when David fought Goliath. What do they look at? The size of armies, the weaponry, the chariots, everything but who? In battles, when it was Israel versus whoever, I'm telling you, the only thing that mattered was where God's hand was. When God's hand was with Israel, they win. When it wasn't again with Israel, they lost. It's that simple. God proved with Gideon, I'm going to take you down to 300. Just to prove that I what? I'm your person. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how bad the enemy looks, how strong it looks. It doesn't matter if you have nothing. God is right there. Better to have nothing in God than everything without him. The only thing that matters in your life is God's hand, God's presence, right? God's purposes and plans. And so you see this battle. It never changes. The devil is trying to muster, all kinds of fear. And it says the Philistines got a mighty army of 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as men, listen to this, and this is really weird. What was the great promise of God to Abraham, one of them? Yes, his descendants would be as great as the sand on the what? Look at what it says. There was 3,000 chariots. Now remember, there's only 3,000 troops. They've got 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. In other words, humanly, and this is, listen, we have to understand this. How many times have you found yourself in a less than advantageous situation? How many times have you looked and said, I'm outnumbered? That's exactly what God desires. So that we learn what? Because if this was the other way, if Israel has all of the chariots and all the charioteers and all of the people and they win, who gets the credit? Everyone but God. If 10,000 people had beaten Goliath, no one would talk about it. It's because David beat him. And so you have to understand that when you have a lack of resource, that when you feel like, man, the odds are stacked against me, that this is all coming against me, hold on, just stop. God's going to do something. I mean, somebody, when they saw, there's a simple, and I wouldn't be good at it, but there's a simple 10-second message that needs to be preached here. They can have all the chariots, all the charioteers, all of the soldiers. We've got God. It's the same. Why didn't they cross the promised land? Why did they kill out a whole generation? Because, it wasn't even that did they know the blessings of God? Yes. How do I know that? They went in for 40 days, and what did they see? Fruit so big they couldn't pick it up. Everything got a land flowing with milk and they saw it. They saw the goodness of God. And that should have been enough to what? We're going. 10 said no, 2 said yes. And they all said no, why? Because there was giants in the land. And Caleb and Joshua said, what? This is nuts. Well, that's the Phil, what do they call them? Cliff notes of them. They argued, what are we doing? We've got God. They don't. Remember what David said to Goliath in the name, you come at me with all your gods, but I'm coming at you in the name of our God. It's always been a test. It's a test for a church. When you have nothing, maybe that's when we have everything. Maybe God has to shrink our resources to the point of like, it's not that, is it? It's you. And so, humanly speaking, we're in trouble. You can imagine, we're going to go fight. Oh, did you count the chariots? Right. You imagine the business meeting? We can do it. Tell them, Peggy. Amen. The Philistines they muster this mighty army, and they camp at Michmash east of Bethaven. There's so much in this. When you are in an army, you need high morale, and you need to see other people what? You need to see other people stand. You need to see other people believe it. At church, you're always called to believe, but it sure helps if other people believe too, right? I mean, I joke about this all the time, but if you're the only one saying something, you're either a genius or an idiot. I mean, I face that prospect sometimes. I read the Bible, I think I know what it means, no one agrees with me. So I'm either a genius or an idiot. I choose to believe one rather than the other, but yeah, I'm not telling you that. You can figure that out. You imagine the scene. God just wants them to look, and what God wants is bring all the chariots, bring all the charioteers. I don't care. We've got God. God has just said he's going to be gracious to. What we need to do is not build an army. We need to remember what he's done, fear him, and faithfully serve him. If we do that, we're assured of coming out okay. That's all that matters. Just faithfully serve him, remember him, We've just gotten out of jail. He should have got rid of us when we asked for a king. He didn't. He's shown us his power by raining down thunder. And this moment, all of this mass army comes. And they camp at Bethaven. And the enemy, when hit, you just need somebody to rise up and be strong. When the enemy sees God's people on the run, what do you think it does? It just accelerates him. Like if you're going to fight someone and they're running. Okay. All right. You just need somebody to stand with you, right? When the enemy sees them running, it just accelerates it. And look at what it says. The men of Israel, what does it say? The men of Israel saw. They looked with their eyes and they saw what does it say? We're in a tight spot. They saw what a tight spot, the New Living says. They saw what a tight spot they were in. Okay, here's the question. How many tight spots have you been in your life? Has God ever let you down in those tight spots? Sometimes you got your own self in a tight spot, by the way. I mean, sometimes our own stupidity gets us in tight spots. But we've been in tight spots. God loves tight spots. So does the devil, because one of them is going to win. The devil uses a tight spot to discourage you, dissuade you, and God uses a tight spot to define who he is and what he can do. And they look with their own, God has just thundered down rain and thunder when it doesn't do that to prove I'm even in control of the weather. I mean, there is no reason to doubt God. And yet they look, they start to count the chariots and charioteers, and they start to get scared, and they're like, uh-oh. And they saw what a tight spot they were in. They were hard pressed by the enemy. That just sounds like regular Christian life, right? Tight spot after tight spot after tight spot. The enemy pressing in. It occurred to me today as I was studying this, one of the hardest parts of leadership is the understanding that as the leader goes, so do a lot of the people. What was Saul's first reaction? To hide, right? He was hiding in the supplies. You imagine this, you imagine standing and saying, don't worry guys, we've got God. And look what their reaction was. They tried to hide in caves. In fact, later on, you know what we'll find? This is how crazy it was. You know what some of them did? They went and became a part of the Philistines team. We'll find that next week if we get there. How bad does it have to be for you to be so scared that you're like, I'm just going to join the Philistines? And then you know what the jokers do? When they start to lose, they jump back to Israelites. I mean, I'd have a problem with that. If I was a leader, I'd be like, what are we doing? You ran away, you joined the enemy, you figured that wasn't good, so now you're back with us? I don't think they got Soldier of the Year, do you? Yeah. They're high. What? Okay, here, look. We all have a natural tendency. The sad thing is we kind of understand why they're hiding in caves, right? I mean, we get it. They're human. They're scared. We might not have hidden in a cave, but we've not wanted to leave the house, right? But think about it. This is what I'm trying to say. If you took the Word of God and you were trying to counsel someone or teach someone, give me one good reason for hiding in a cave. You can't. And here's what the world doesn't understand. We stand here and say how great is our God, mighty, holy, perfect, matchless, all the words. We sing all of them in worship, right? Over a month period, there's no telling how much we've sang about God. And yet when life gets hard, what are we doing? Hiding in the cave. Now what's crazy is the enemy ain't hiding at all. They're out front ready to fight. But the Christian, so-called, the Israelites, the God's people, they're hiding in the cave. You see how crazy that is? You see how crazy? And these are, by the way, these were special troops. These were the good ones. These were the elite troops. If the elite troops are hiding in the caves, what's the normal troops doing? Do you see that's the problem? Think about how many victories the devil wins when people are hiding in the cave. You've lost your testimony. You've lost your hope. You're not helping the Israelite army at all. In fact, you're infecting it. You're spurring on the enemy. I mean, there's so much wrong with this. They're hiding in cave. Why are you hiding in a cave? Because I've seen a chariot and a charioteer and soldiers. Yeah, but haven't you seen God? Well, yeah, but look, it gets hard sometimes, right? And this is, look, they hide in thickets, rocks, holes, and cisterns. At what point do you say, let's just hide in a cistern? That'll work. Better than trusting God, let's just hide in a hole. You know what my first question is? Where's the food coming from? I mean, how long, what is the plan of hiding down the hole? Like, as hard as it is to trust God in that moment, how do we get food? God's hand. How do we get protection? God's hand. How are we going to win this? God's hand. There's an answer to every question. How do we get protected down a hole? Pray they don't find us. And imagine that. Imagine hiding down a hole and asking God for help. Wouldn't that be a bit weird and uncomfortable? God, I know I'm in total disobedience, but will you help me out? I mean, wouldn't that be embarrassing to pray? God, I'm meant to be fighting for you. I'm scared to death. I've run away. I don't really want to get anything that you're asking me to do, but P.S., help me out. Elijah can tell you when you need food, a raven can drop a steak at your foot. That's a pretty cool deal. So they're hiding. And what's worse, the inner man is just totally what? It's totally gone. And we could sit here and remonstrate about Israel, but it's our battle today, isn't it? Are you going to trust God when it gets hard? Are you going to trust him when the enemy's... are we going to make up our own, like, let's do rocks and holes and cisterns? Because better that than to be still and know that he's God. Some of them said, forget this, we don't even want to be around. And look at what it says in verse 7. Some of them crossed the Jordan and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. Some of them just said no thanks and ran away. Awesome. What do you think that's doing to Saul? Here's what I'll tell you. Never underestimate the power of a leader and the power of who he's leading. As one goes, so do the other. Like church, for instance. You think it's important what the pastor's like? You think it's important what the congregation's like? You see, Saul has a congregation, so to speak, that is hiding in what? They're running away, they're in caves, they're in thickets. How much are they helping Saul? When Aaron is making a golden calf as a leader at the time, when Moses is up the mountain, how much is he helping the people? He's not. You see how it closely links? The leader's meant to help the congregants, and the congregants are meant to help what? You realize if one goes crazy, it's not helping the other. If I go crazy, it don't help you, and if you go crazy, it don't help me. And all the people, you imagine being Saul at this moment. If you weren't scared, now you might be. You look around and your elite troops are running away. In that moment, you've got to be strong in the Lord, strong in the Lord. And look at what it says. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal. And his men were what? That's just what you want. How you doing, guys? The best thing you can say about them was they didn't run away. Thank you for that. Do you remember? Go back to 1 Samuel 10. There's a really important message. Do you remember how God was going to prove everything to Saul by all of the powerful things that would happen, how he'd meet all the musicians and how he would prophesy? Look at what it says. There's, in verse 8 of 1 Samuel 10, when God speaks, he's not ambiguous. It's not like we make it difficult, but if he wants you to know it, he'll tell you it plainly. He says, go down to where? Gilgal ahead of me. I will join, listen to what he says. Go to Gilgal. After all this is done, go to Gilgal. We're finally now at Gilgal. And he says, I will join you there to sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. Samuel says, I'll join you there. It's not difficult. Go to Gilgal, and I, because he's the priest, will give burnt offerings and peace offerings. Samuel's the only one allowed to do it. Saul can't do it. Saul's king, but he's not priest. Samuel says, go to Gilgal. After he says to them, do what you must do, for God is with you. Verse 8, then go to Gilgal. Wait for me to do this. You must wait for how many days? Okay, what does 7 mean? Well, it is perfect, yeah, but 7 means 7. So if you wake up in 3 days, don't expect to see Samuel. And if you do, something's gone wrong. On day 8, complain all you want. If it's really God telling him. When God says, I'll meet you in 7 days, what's he mean? All right, so if he doesn't show up, then you can ask questions. But guess what? He'll always show up. Can you see the tight spot God's got Saul in? Go to Gilgal with trembling men, and I'll be there in 7 seconds. 7 minutes. 7 hours. No. 7 days. Day 1, day 2, day 3. What are we doing? We got to wait 7 days. That was a simple instruction, right? So then you get to verse 8. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel. That sounds so good, doesn't it? Sounds like finally he's getting it. I mean, by the way, if you don't wait for Samuel, you're really waiting for God, what's your best option? You don't have one. As Samuel had instructed him earlier, but Samuel still didn't what? Now don't misread that. It says Samuel still didn't come. Does that mean Samuel missed the 7 days? No. Listen, let's just say, if God's going to say, I'll be there within 168 hours, like the last day is a bit ambiguous, like it could be like, I'll meet you Friday. What time Friday? Well, Friday. If he meets you at 11:59, is he true? Yeah. If God says, I'll meet you sometime Friday and wants to push it to the limit, what's he going to do? He's not going to make you early. He's going to meet you what? Yeah, on time, but late to us. And so Saul is waiting and waiting and waiting. And what are we called to do when we're waiting on the Lord? Be still and what? Give thanks. Serve him. Be faithful. You're in a tight spot and God's like, I'll respond, but I'll be a bit. All of the things we know to do. And look, do you think it's any coincidence that the Bible says his men were trembling with fear? No one's there singing spiritual hymns and songs. They're there together and it's just misery loves what? And there's no one there saying, we got this, God's got this. Saul waited 7 days for Samuel because Samuel had instructed him. Samuel didn't come. And Saul starts to think. And that's when it gets dangerous. Whenever we think we're the answer, we have to manipulate or we have to jump in and help God, you've got a problem. God's like, I'm going to take care of this. Samuel, you'll meet him in 7 days. Samuel says, I'll meet you in. And by the way, Samuel has been 100 for 100. He's like, you'll meet these guys, you'll meet these, you'll prophesy, you'll have all of these musical instruments. Samuel has more than proven himself to be the man that God is using. So there's no reason for Saul to be like, I can't trust him. Wait, remember the whole donkey thing? Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away. They were in trouble. Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, they're done. What should you do in that moment? Man, you need to pray and you need to hold on and you need to wait for the 7 days. We're on the 7th day. We're on the 7th day. Let me ask you this before we go further. Have you ever done anything and regretted it about 2 hours later? You ever moved ahead of God and realized if I had just shut my mouth, I'd have been much better off? If I hadn't have just done that, I would have saved myself a whole lot of heartache. He's literally 2 hours away from the finish line. He's literally a few hours away from obeying God and doing brilliant and getting an A+. And yet, again, with his eyes, he starts to look at his men. He's basing everything on the state of his men. They're fearful. They're slipping away in every kind of way, probably. And it says in verse 9, and here you go. And here's the problem. Here's the problem with a king. He demanded. And when a king demands, guess what? This is the whole problem. When God demands something for you, it's always what? Good and pleasing and perfect, right? When Saul demands, this is God's argument. When Saul demands something, you have to what? You have to do it. Now, when the king of Israel demands something, does that mean it's in your best interest? No. When God does, it is. But when king, no. And Saul demands what? And here's this progression in Saul. He's getting scared. Now he oversteps his bounds. You ever met someone like that? They get scared and they overstep their boundary. We can do it at work. You can do it in your home. You can do it at church. You can do it all over the place. People take on stuff that was none of their right or business to do it. Yeah. Look what it says. Samuel has said, I'll bring the peace and the burnt offerings. We'll do it. I'll do that with you. Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And what should somebody have said? Yeah. No. See, people are scared of the king. That's how he roused so many times people last time. It said they were scared of his anger. This is a classic case of say no to the king and yes to God. They know the rules. They know the rules. Nobody can just offer burnt offerings and it has to be Samuel. It has to be. And Samuel's already said, I'm coming to do it. But we get excitable sometimes, we get scared, we get flustered, and we jump ahead. And he says, hey, bring me the burnt offerings and the peace offering. And somebody with any kind of guts should have said, I ain't doing it. Kill me if you want to, I ain't doing it. And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering what? What has God just said? If you be faithful, I'll help you out. If you disobey me, I'm going to take the kingship away from you. Here we are, right away. Saul gets in a jam. Saul gets hacked off. Saul gets scared. And he's like, you imagine, think about, next time you're doing something crazy, just stop and think about if this can be pleasing to God. God has said, all I want is your faithful obedience. I've told you to wait for 7 days. In what world can you justify, I'm going to take things into my own hands? There's no way you can stand and say, God is pleased with what I did. There is no argument to be made where Saul misunderstood, where Saul was right, where there was any reason for Saul to do what he did. No reason whatsoever. What's a real reason? What's a real reason he's doing this? He doesn't fear the Lord. He doesn't. If he feared the Lord, he would never have done it. And so he sets about, and remember, this peace offering, thanksgiving, and this burnt offering, like, this is so weird. Like, we love you, God. We're going to serve you, God. We're thankful, God. Here, have all of me, God. And meanwhile, you're totally disobedient. People try that today. I'll come to church. I'll give a tithe. I'll do whatever. But you're not having my obedience. You know what that means to God? You think you can get away with coming to church and doing all the right things and being completely obstinate with God? It's the Pharisees all over again. They did everything and they didn't even know God. And so Saul, the leader, the king, sins. And he says, bring me the offerings. And he sacrifices the burnt offering himself. In what world does disobedience bring joy to you? In what world does messing around with God's plans and purposes help you out in your life? Like, did he really expect God to be like, thank you, Saul. I needed your help. Look what happens. And this is, listen, if you don't think God knows what to do, when to do it, that he has a sense of humor, all of these things, think about, now put yourself in Saul's position. When you're deep in sin, you don't want to be around church. Why? Because it's too much kind of like being around God. You don't want to really be around godly people, especially people who have intuition and wisdom and might know you're going crazy. You don't want to be around someone that's got the heart to tell you and call you out on it. Birds of a feather. So when you're off in left field, you know what's balmy, what's crazy? People who are in left field suddenly become friends with people they've never been friends with, but the commonality is we're both in left field. Saul, the last person Saul wants to run into is who? I mean, when you're committing sin, especially, look, he's just finishing. You think this is accident? He's just finishing with the burnt offering, and who gets there? You think that's coincidence? If you're doing that burnt offering, you're almost like, right? I mean, it's almost like your kid, like, don't ever drink, I won't. Last drop. And your parent walks in like, oh, whoa, what's that? Samuel, in God's sovereignty and providence, he hasn't arrived late. This is what I mean. From the time he started the peace offerings and the burnt offerings, and however long that took is however long he was almost at the finish line. He was almost made it. He had waited 7 days. Yeah, it's like you have to lay the clock, and at 6:55, he's just like, I can't. It's nuts. I just heard, and I don't know what this was. Microsoft or something built this building, this room, that has no sound whatsoever. It was some weird thing, and you could even hear your heartbeat in it. And they ran this thing that you could get $1 million if you could last in it for 10 minutes. And it freaked people out. And they said no one did it, no one could do it. And they said the record was 8 minutes and 53 seconds. And I said, who's the nutbar? You had 1 minute and 7, you just had to wait 1 minute and 7 seconds and you get $1 million. And they freaked out and got out at 8:53. He probably didn't know how long it was, and your mind's gone, right? And whatever. But can you imagine getting out and being like, well, I had 1 minute, you had 1 minute. Imagine explaining that to your wife. Go back. Saul gets caught red-handed. When God moves, look at what happens. Just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, Samuel arrived. And Saul is church 101. Saul puts on this front. Look at what he said. He went out to meet and welcome him. Man, this is like putrid. This is like kids coming home and saying, I love you, Daddy, knowing what they've done. And Samuel looks at him and says, what? How many of you like that question? How come no one asks you that when you've done something good? It's only when you've done something horrendous. What have you done? What if you're with God, when Nathan confronts David later, what does David say? When Nathan confronts David about adultery, what does David say? I am that man. We are so prideful and so stubborn and so ignorant and so arrogant that when God confronts sin, we still just play around. Saul, it's not that Saul doesn't have, listen to me, there is no reason to do what he done. None. None. You ever been there? You ever done something where there's no reason you did it? The best thing you can do is say what? I'm sorry and I repent. And I'm willing to take whatever consequences come. I shouldn't have done it. And Samuel, really God, looks at Saul straight in the eye and says, what is this you have done? What's the truth? I've sinned. He says, I saw my man scattering from me, and here it is. Here's Adam and Eve again, right? I did, but it's a woman you gave me. Look at what he said. Do you see how we fight this we fight this two ways in our life. We hear people, when we confront people, we hear them do that to us, and we do it to other people. Like, this is very familiar to us on both ends. We have both been like, I can't believe they didn't accept responsibility for that. And we've also been the people who didn't what? Accept responsibility. All you need Saul to say is, you caught me. All he says, look at what he says. I saw my man scattering from me. In other words, I didn't have a choice. And then check this out. He looks at Samuel, this is pretty brazen, and says, and you didn't arrive when you said you would. That's a lie to begin with. And this is why Samuel has to be like pretty godly, right? Because at that point you're just like, I mean, imagine Samuel said, what are you doing? And he's like, well, my man left and you didn't come. It's your fault. You see how annoying that is? But that's us sometimes, right? And God speaks to us and we're like, no, I had to. No, you didn't. I had to eat the fruit. No, you didn't. What was Adam and Eve's stick? We were naked and afraid. Who told you we're naked? Oh, man. I mean, what can Saul say? I didn't burn them? Mind and next time he sins, sheep are going to make noises. We'll see that in a bit. Look at what it says. I saw my man scattering, and you didn't arrive when you said you would, and the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal. And here it is. This is like spiritual putrid. This is absolute. And I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. You know how many people have done crazy things and attached the Lord's name to it? You know how many people said the Lord told you to gossip? I highly doubt that. The Lord told me to leave church and never go back to one. No, he didn't. The Lord told me to divorce my wife no, he didn't. The Lord told me to have an affair. No, he didn't. He didn't. There's certain things, God, you already know he's not saying it. And look what he says. I haven't asked for the Lord's help. Hold on. The greatest thing that the Lord's going to help you with is obedience. Just stand and be quiet and be still and pray and hold on. And listen to what he says. So I felt compelled. You felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came. You know what he's saying? Basically, the modern day version of it is, the Lord told me. The Spirit made me. We still fight this today. I'm surprised I'm surprised God is as patient with us as he is. This is really serious in church. People do this. You know, we naively think that if someone says the Lord's told me so, we just believe them. That's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Pastors can manipulate it. Parents can manipulate it. Verse 13, I'll finish a few minutes so we can pray. How foolish. You know what that word means? You have just been messed up spiritually, morally. How foolish. Samuel doesn't say, there, does he? Samuel doesn't say, hey, no big deal, you're my buddy. How foolish! You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. You didn't keep the commands. Saul, the truth is, you did not keep the command. It's your fault. You didn't keep the command. You didn't wait for 7 days. That's all you had to do. You didn't. And check this out, and I'll finish here. But this is, man, our sin, our mess up in our anointings, you know who really suffers from this? Saul really suffers, but so does Jonathan. You know, Jonathan will end up dead too. And you can trace it back to a father that went crazy. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. And look at what God says through Samuel. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established. Hold on. When the Lord establishes someone, what can take it away? When the Lord establishes anything, what can take it away? Nothing. Even though Saul was crazy, if he had just learned to obey the Lord, God's like, I would establish you as king, and I would do something special for you. I would give you a dynasty. I would give you a son who would be on the throne. But now look at what he says. I would have established your kingdom over Israel for how long? Forever. But now your kingdom must what? How many kings were in Saul's family? One, him. And he messed it up so much, God said, we're done with your whole family. For the Lord, and listen to what he says. For the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. It's David, but ultimately it's Jesus. But also, David is a man after God's own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people, because you simply have not kept what? Saul, you're done. It's over. Your dynasty, your kingdom. Now he lets him reign for 40 years. But Jonathan never makes a throne. You tell me how important your life is to your legacy, to your children, to your grandchildren. Don't believe that your life just affects you, that your sin just affects you. I believe you can rob your family of spiritual blessings because of what you do. It happened with Saul. He robbed Jonathan of being king because he wouldn't obey God. That should give us a fear of the Lord. That should help us to... My life affects other people. Now, to that point, they don't have an excuse to say, well, it's his fault. No, everyone's accountable. But Jonathan would have been an amazing king, and God's like, well, I'm not doing it. He used Jonathan. He helped Jonathan. Jonathan had to give his kingship literally away to David, literally the things of a king, because of his father. It's kind of crazy. All because he didn't obey. And he was like an hour, 2 hours, however long from obeying it. And he gave in. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts before we pray?